Well, hello there, friendos. How are we doing today? Today, I'm going to continue the little talk about Araby. But now, oh, it's because my rank is reduced, I have to go back to using my pack mule, which is fine. He's still a good boy. He's a good boy. But today, I'm going to talk a little bit about Araby and the parts I love about the new fan stuff in Araby. Last time, I talked about um, kind of like a lot of the official lore and some of the stuff we got and some of the stuff I was like kind of ugh about. But now we're gonna talk about some of the newer stuff in the fan lore, and this is like from Warhammer Armies projects, and they kind of expanded a lot of this stuff and they made it, I think, in a lot of cases more interesting. I think they gave them some character that's a little bit more unique and a little less just dudes with turbans. I mean, yeah, you still got dudes with turbans, but now they're cooler dudes with turbans. So that's neat. And I just decided for this video, I thought it would be a bit of fun to just kind of ride along the road through our lovely, lovely Nordland area. Just check out some of the sites, and then, I'm just going to keep riding my horse along the way, going into Norska and all these other fun places. So yeah, that's just what I thought would be kind of a fun thing for this video. So, let's go. So one of the first things I'm going to mention about this version of Araby that I think is very interesting is that it's at least a little bit more based on historical Arabia, and there's certainly a little bit more culture and things that they added that are kind of interesting. Although a big part of it is that they're a nation of slavers, for instance, and there's also a lot of like there are people who have a lot of corsairs and there's a lot of piratery involved. But the ultimate thing is that um, it's not just that they also have a culture where they are very amenable to guests, and they have a big culture about like sharing what you have, and they're mostly divided between the nomadic peoples and the sedentary peoples. And this is kind of interesting because this is if you look at like historical Arab society, this is actually kind of a big feature of it, is that it was frequently divided between like the settled peoples and the nomadic peoples. For instance, there is commonly a belief, even among like settled Arabian lives, like for instance, this was a common practice among the tribes of Quraysh, which are the tribe that Muhammad came from, the Prophet Muhammad came from. Uh, like there was this whole idea of you would send your young children for several years to live among the Bedouins because they were believed to preserve um, original Arabian Arabic culture more than city dwellers. So the idea was that you would go and you'd spend several years among the Arabian people out there, and they would pay to have taken care of and all this other stuff. But they would have this idea of, I don't know if that looks like comfortable to rest like that with a shield, but they would have this idea where basically like you would learn like real true Arabian culture from the Bedouins before you came back and got like to live your life among your clans and things like that. Um, and it's also very interesting because we do have uh, so I mentioned one of the things I'll talk about a little bit first is that I mentioned that they have a lot of a slave culture going on, and actually something that I personally find interesting about this is I am currently reading a book called Islam and Slavery, and it's by a Muslim convert who talks about like kind of like the history of what we call slavery, whether or not there's really this one unified thing that we can really point to that's really called slavery, or is if it's a much more complicated idea and it kind of takes on different forms throughout cultures and things like that. And actually, within the fan made book, there is a mention of this because you have like the Mamluks and the Janissaries, who were like these slave soldiers. But like you wouldn't necessarily consider them like lower class parts of society. In fact, in some of these cases, some of these slaves would have quite a bit of power, and that's actually true to like the historical elements. So I think that's kind of interesting. Um, there's also things like men and women are equal in Arabian society, in Warhammer, and I think that's pretty neat. There, you have a lot of focus on the idea of like all enlightened Arabians worship the one. They worship like the one god, and there's like this the idea would be like the grand sultan is kind of in charge of all of the Arabians who worship the one god. So monotheism is definitely an element of this culture, and of course monotheism was an important element of Arab culture. We see this quite frequently, but there is some mention of some folks worshiping jinn still, and there's different kinds of jinn. I find all that very interesting. The Arabian people are like set apart in a lot of ways. They have this interesting culture where once again you're going back and forth between like settled and nomadic peoples, and like the settled peoples are much more they would probably remind you more of the empire, but they do have like advanced architecture, and they have like science, and they have um advanced medicine and alchemy, and they have also, interestingly enough, a relationship with the high elves. Still, there are in some of the ports, there are still places where the high elves will sail in, and they will trade with the Arabians, and the Arabians have a lot of different things to trade. They trade slaves, but they also trade spices, and they trade certain magical artifacts, and they have cloth and a variety of other things that they trade very often. And you would see that they're actually a fairly cosmopolitan people in some parts of the country, similar to the Empire, which, as I've said previously, one of my favorite things about the Empire is how cosmopolitan it is. So I do like that that's kind of carried over here into the Arabian lands, that they are very cosmopolitan in a lot of ways, and they're supposed to be very welcoming of guests. There is a certain suspicion, and in some places, like Sigmar worship is kind of illegal, but there's a certain suspicion toward the Westerners. But there's also, interestingly enough, like places where like they're basically small empire towns and colonies. So it's kind of interesting to think about how you would have these different cultures kind of mingle together, just because there are places where the Empire and Araby kind of meet and discuss things, and have like these different ideas kind of voiced up against one another. And another thing that I like that is corrected from a lot of the official lore is that in the official lore, as previously mentioned in the video, like almost all the women have their midriffs exposed. And I was really not big on that, but I do like how in this new fan lore, that's not really the case. In the new fan lore, it's much more like hmm, that's a river troll. It's weird to me that the river trolls get hair. Eh, and warts. I know. I shouldn't mention your wart, should I? I'm sorry. But they do also have like certain amounts of gunpowder and things like that. It's really really cool. Part of what I love about Warhammer Army projects is that it's continued on um Warhammer Fantasy so that you can still play it on the tabletop, and that's really cool. But they also have a lot of these unique units, like they talk about like how having like Arabian flying carpets and you know, Jinn that you can deploy and all kinds of different groups like that. They do also have slave levies that you can throw into combat, so if you want to mix your human and Skaven tendencies, I guess you could do that. I wouldn't do that because that seems cruel to me, but you know, maybe that's just me. Oh, a dwarf. Oh, a wizard. Oh, another dwarf. Oh, an elf. Ah, what a land of opportunity. But yeah, there is also uh like the Grand Sultan being the leader of all enlightened Arabians is kind of interesting because that would kind of make him fit into the role of a caliph from like historical times. So I personally find that kind of interesting. Um, Something else that's kind of interesting about Arabia is that there is some chaos influence, but it's nowhere near as much as it is in the Northern Kingdoms. Basically, like the further north you go in the Warhammer world, the closer you are to the Chaos Waste and closer you are to like their warping effects and things like that, because that's like where the main source of chaos energy comes from. Is in the oh, there's an elf thing here. That's weird. But that's like the main source is like the collapsed old one gate. So like they're further away from chaos, and there is still some minor chaos cults and stuff like that that end up popping up here and there, but it's nowhere near as much of a threat as it is in the Empire. So if you're scared of chaos, going to Arabia might be good for you. Although then there are other things you have to worry about, like the undead, the air. Trying to think, where's this go? Oh, Ausland, and then it goes. Okay, yeah. Right. Okay, no, this is still the right way. I'll go this way. Ooh, very pretty, full of forests. There is less land diversity as there is in the Empire, but there's still, like different cities and different places you can go to. Um, Piratery is very important to the Arabians. There's a lot of corsairs who sail out and try to raid other ships and things like that. And it's kind of interesting because then if you wanted to do it, you could I'm gonna help this guy. Hello. That was interesting. I didn't go up that far, but now I can actually be like my full level. Why did my tactical slots get unequipped? Again. It keeps happening. But that's okay. It doesn't take very long. Oh no, dude, this is the one I want. Dirty tricks. Sorry. I'll get back to it in a second, I promise. I just wanted to take care of that. But yeah. So that is one of the interesting things to note, that there is like a lot of piratery. There's even some cases where marauders and people from like all the way as far as Norska will sail down to look for mercenary work. And there's also, a lot of mercenaries, and there's even some ogres and other folk who happen to be hanging out in the um, Arabian area. But there's also a lot of Arabian Araby that is just like desert. It's just harsh desert that you still can't really do much of anything with. But they do have techniques and things to get around uh, dealing with uh, the harshness of the weathers. They have different techniques and abilities that allow them to survive in a very harsh environment. So that's pretty cool. They also have some really cool armor and stuff like that. It looks very similar to like medieval um, North African and Arab and Persian armor. So they have like all kinds of different mixes of stuff. They do still have like mixes of like Ottoman units in the sense that they have like the Janissaries, but they also have um pretty sure they have Mamluks. Yeah, they have Mamluks, which are more of like a northern Egyptian or like a North African thing. Uh Men can also have harems where they basically can have multiple women and stuff like that, multiple bed wives, where like they're kind of like mostly married to like the one lady, and then they have multiple bed wives in the harem. But like, if a woman goes into the harem, like, the man who owns the harem is responsible for like protecting them and keeping them comfortable and giving them like the stuff that they want and all that, and the harems are still like these hotbeds for political inquiry and like treachery and stuff like that, which they were in real life as well. If you ever read about, like, for instance, the Ottoman Sultan's harems, there was all kinds of plotting and stabbing and terrible things going on there. Hmm. This is a nice little town. Hmm. Minus the hanging skeletons. So yeah, you do have a lot of these different elements. The main religion is, of course, still the worship of the own, because you got to be an enlightened Arabian person. But there are also like some smaller cults, and like there are some uh, temples to like foreign gods, and like Myrmidia, I believe, is mentioned as one of them. It's very kind of interesting to see how that all plays out. And there's also like uh, this whole category of law interpreters and judges who end up being like the important part in both religious and like civil life, because the judges will determine C8. What does that mean? No. But like these judges who will determine all different parts of like, so like if you have any sort of dispute, you can go to one of these judges and be like, hey, Imam man, what do I do in this case? And they'll like give you a ruling, or they can like sentence people to jail and stuff like that. But like there's like this whole category of like lawmakers and judges and things like that that kind of oversee political and religious life in Araby. So the interesting thing there is that like political and religious life is not separated. They are kind of one and the same, which is kind of true in the Empire as well. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but like, the Grand Church of Sigmar, the Healing Temple of Sigmar, has the big old, they have like electric count of votes and things like that. So there's a lot of influence and stuff like that. But this goes all the way from like the judges on the ground all the way up to like viziers and things like that. And one of the things I think I really like about it is just that it has that nice, like I'm talking about a lot of different things I find interesting, but like I really like this kind of uh just feeling of like Arabian Nights. I think is kind of cool, kind of a neat thing to have. And they have their own unique culture, but they also have influence with like other parts of the world. Why is this guy just standing in the road? Oh, I guess I should have seen that coming. But yeah, and you don't have to worry about as much about stuff like this, like a horrible chaos cult is just standing in the middle of the road menacingly. Although I would have thought that from his looks and stuff like that, I thought he was going to be like more of a, you know, wizard man, but he was more of a I'm gonna try and stab you man. Either way. So yeah, I just wanted to share some of these things I like about Arabia. Arabia is a really cool um I'm sorry, Arabia. I keep saying Arabia because like they are referred to as Arabians, just spelled differently. But Araby is a really cool faction that has a lot of neat things going on, and I think the fan versions are, in fact, much more interesting than the official lore. Even though there is a lot of official lore, and you can take stuff you like from both, I think that the fan versions of the stuff is much more interesting overall. But yeah, and I hope you enjoyed looking at all the interesting little things on the way. Is this not? Okay, it's kind of weird because there's like so much stuff I have to walk around that goes like because I'm just trying to go through the land, but it's taking me like straight through this public quest, which is full of weird corn cultist people. I mean, they're just hanging out. Also, that is a very stylized skull. I know that the symbol of corn is actually supposed to be a skull, but it's like it's so stylized as to not even really look like a skull. See, once again, if you were in Arabia, Arabia, which is actually known as Araby, but we'll call it Arabia because I've messed up and said that several times now, you wouldn't have to deal with all these cultists. You would just have to deal with Big Jin coming to your land and being like, "Hey, would you like to make a deal? Do you like elemental magic?" And if you say no, then they're like, "Oh, well, I'm offended." I'm sorry, that was silly. Anyway, for right now, I'm just gonna go ahead and say goodbye. I hope you enjoyed me talking about things I like about Arabia. Araby. Yeah, like I said, I'm gonna keep messing that up. Things I like about Araby. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day. Like and subscribe if you wanna, and give people hugs. Hugs are nice. And Yamina here with her half Araby nature is going to give you a wave and a toast. Because you deserve a toast, because you've been working hard today. Probably, maybe, I don't know. Enjoy toast. Okay, bye.